it should start. And we are now live.
Yep, it says live.
Well, good evening. My name's Dave Hemberger, and on behalf of the Exeter Township School Board and our administration, I want to welcome everybody to our board's budget town hall meeting. While our intention was obviously to have an in-person community meeting this spring, the current circumstances have necessitated a change in plans. So we hope the Zoom meeting format that you're about to see will allow as many community members to listen in as well as to participate as much as possible. On our panel this evening are our board members, Mr. Hunter Ahrens, who is the chair of our Business Functions Committee, as well as a board member, Mr. John Fiddler, board member, and other board members this evening also include Mrs. Allison Wilson and Mr. Fury Miller. With us tonight also, you'll see our district central office team, Dr. Bob Phillips, our superintendent, Dr. Patrick Winters, our assistant superintendent, and Mrs. Ann Guidish, our director of business functions and support operations, as well as Ms. Christine Whelan, who's our HR director. We're also being assisted this evening by the very capable and indispensable services of our IT department. That includes Mr. Joe Way and Mr. Joe Calamita. Mr. Way will be assisting us with some of the community and public questions that come in. So our goal tonight are twofold. One is to provide the community with an overview of our board's proposed budget for the 2020-21 school year. So we'll talk about the factors that have affected the recommendations and the impact that the budget will have on the operations of the school district. There are several areas where we'll be looking and considering reductions or cuts in our expenditures. And these are actions that are necessitated due to what you may hear represent structural deficits that we incur. Also, we'll be addressing the anticipated loss of revenue due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and what appears to be a devastating impact on our local and state economy, and how the shutdown of jobs and the shutdown in general will factor into our budget planning for the year and beyond. So the other goal of the meeting this evening is to provide a forum for comments and to allow an opportunity for public questions and answers. Some of the questions have been submitted in advance, and we anticipate that we'll be answering those questions in the order that they came in. But we'll also be expecting to have some questions possibly during our presentation this evening, and we'll be taking those questions during the meeting. Just going to take a second to ask Joe Way to tell us a little bit about how folks might be able to submit a question during the meeting if they would like to. Joe?
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was muted. We will be accepting emails during the duration of the meeting. Send your emails to the same address that was listed, webadmin, webadmin @exetersd.org. As emails are received, they'll be added to the docket of questions, and we will get them addressed this evening.
Great. Thanks, Joe. So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that this has really been a tough time, a really tough time for our families, our students, our graduating seniors, and our teachers. It's like nothing I've ever seen or experienced. So it's been really impressive to see the amazing response from our community. But I also want to make a special note about our teachers. You know, this happens to be Teacher Appreciation Week. And so I think it's an opportune time for us to publicly recognize the resilience, the innovation, the dedication and the creativity of our professional staff in keeping the learning process going for our kids. They've stepped up at this critical time. They filled an enormous void. And it's times like these that really make us realize how crucial teachers are to our community. Teachers, if you're listening, our thanks for all that you do. You're doing fantastic work. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Hunter Ahrens, who will walk us through some information. He'll provide an overview of the board process, that we used in coming to this point. And also we'll go into some of the details regarding some major aspects of the proposal that you can expect to see in our budget. So Hunter, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Hemberger. What I want to try and do is make sure that I go through some of the major areas of the scope of our work, as well as the vision behind some of the things that we've been doing in the process that we've taken to get here. And then as we go on throughout the night, if there's additional detail of a very technical nature, we'll try to address those as they come up. But I do have a written statement here, and I apologize, I'm not going to be looking at the camera. I was having technical difficulties in being able to look directly at what's going on here. But as I said, my goal is to provide a broad overview of the vision, reasoning, and process the district took to draft this proposed budget. Since the beginning of the school year, the board created an expectation for our administrators to address a developing structural deficit. A structural deficit means that the district consistently spends more than it receives. This structural deficit has developed over several years and is driven by several factors. The state's level of funding, which disproportionately requires the district to use local sources of revenue, numerous mandates that require the district to expend more funds to afford these mandates, the increase in costs of goods and services, and personnel costs, especially wages and benefits. In the past 2 school years, the board has adopted deficit budgets for 2 primary reasons: to maintain our district's level of proficiency in educating young men and women, and controlling the growth of our property tax rates. We recognize that due to several structural factors, as well as decisions made over time, we also have a comparably high rate of taxation. We recognize that our primary duty is to maintain the district's capacity to inspire children to become productive participants of our community and nation. And that this capacity is oftentimes what drives the desire to live in, and to a great degree, the value of any community. To ensure that we would address the structural deficit in a significant way, the board's Committee on Business Functions adopted goals that would guide controlling the growth of spending and setting us up in future years to make structural realignments that maintain effectiveness and reduce spending. The ultimate goal of all of this has not been to cut spending, but to do more with less. While that sounds mystical on first hearing it, we find that many other districts have successful models of education that are improving their students' performance over time while spending less than Exeter does. In other words, we are working to narrow the district's focus to those areas that have the most impact on students. As the events around the world related to the coronavirus have unraveled, this challenge becomes more timely and more intense. Our goal is to avoid an overreaction to these circumstances. Our mission remains the same: educate this community's children. These circumstances also require a measured and well-reasoned approach, which is what we believe this current budget draft represents. In conclusion, the current projected budget deficit is $3.4 million after including the reductions we'll discuss this evening. That deficit could grow more depending on the economic conditions for the rest of the year. The reductions we are currently considering total $1.34 million and include reducing future spending, eliminating projects, cutting supply budgets, restructuring positions, and eliminating some positions. The professional opinion of our district's cabinet is that this proposal is workable, and we will continue to make good on our obligation to students. This proposal was considered with extensive dialogue with the community, many of our senior administrators outside of the cabinet, and the board. The evaluation of our spending will continue as we work to control that deficit that I discussed earlier. in the coming months and years as we make strategic choices about providing the most effective and life-changing education for children while operating in a highly efficient manner. The comments of community members will inform how and what we consider, so we appreciate your participation and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Hunter. Is there any additional information that we want to present and prior to the question period? At the extent of our information?
I can certainly try and elaborate if you'd like me to. So one of the things that we're seeing, especially with the coronavirus, and as Dave alluded to, is a significant reduction of our local revenue from our income in primarily earned income tax, transfer tax, and business privilege tax. Those areas are looking to have significant impacts that we won't make up because of the downturn in the economy. And we will probably see lower collection rates in our property taxes because I think people are going to struggle to pay their bill on time. So they're going to have to delay payment or even move into a delinquent status. And those funds will eventually be made up in future years, but it also poses challenges for this year as well. And because of this, what we're anticipating that we're going to have to do this year is reach into our fund reserve. Our fund reserve is healthy. We have a strong fund reserve, but that fund reserve is really dedicated to affording projects that we see coming up in the future. And we're in a very good position now. And if we continue down this road, we're going to find that that position changes very quickly, especially if we have a deficit like this more than 1 year. So those are some of the things that we are considering looking forward, especially. We don't anticipate that this is going to be the type of budget deficit we see year over year. But we have looked in our 5-year projection that's been presented by our administration, and I think that there are a lot of challenges over the next 5 years that cannot be solved with property tax increases, especially when we look at the district's history of sticking to about 1.2% property tax increases over each year. So those are some of the dynamics that we see going on right now. So we're going to have to continue to really evaluate our budget going forward and try and understand where those revenues are going to end up. And we're going to have to continue working with our associations of all of our employees so that they can understand some of the challenges the district faces, and that we're able to come to amicable agreements with them over the next couple of years as we move forward into the future, because this is going to be a very challenging time. It's going to have long-lasting implications, and about 70% or more of our budget is dedicated to personnel costs. So that piece of working with our employees is going to be really critical.
Thanks, Hunter. I think that was a really an excellent overview, and I think really does help explain it from my perspective, the extent of the dilemma that we're kind of facing right now. Part of, as you said, is structural, and there have to be corrections periodically. Especially considering that we're not getting the kind of support that we believe we need to get from the state. There have been several initiatives that have been, I think, proposed to the legislature to try to address some of those deficits. I mean, I look at the charter school funding, particularly the cyber charter school funding, where there is a proposal that would ultimately serve or save the Exeter school district hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by simply recalibrating how funding is provided to the charters from public schools. But that doesn't seem to be going anywhere in the legislature. So we're not getting the kind of assistance in terms of additional revenue or even some mandate relief that we would like to see from Harrisburg. And that makes it even more challenging. And each year, it's pretty clear that the demands on our local revenue sources just continue to increase. And the revenue proportionate to the local revenue, the revenue from the state, just has not kept up, with expenses as they continue to grow from year to year. It looks like this coming year, at the very best, will be receiving flat funding from the from the state legislature, and that's a best case scenario. And there's every reason to believe we'll be getting less money from the state as a result of everything that's happened with the COVID virus. So any other comments from board members, administrators before we start into the question part?
I would just encourage our community to join in on our budget presentations in May and June to follow really what's going on. I'm sure a lot of you saw the article in the paper this past Sunday with projections on revenue shortfalls, local revenue shortfalls. And as Hunter mentioned, in our most recent presentation, I used a projection of a reduction of 1.1 million, and projections coming out of the state for school districts show a potential up to 3 million for Exeter School District in a reduction of local revenue for 2021. So I do encourage you to listen to the budget presentations and also to continue to give feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Mrs. Godish. Any other comments from board members, administrators? Okay, well, Mr. Way, why don't you get us started? We'll go, as we said, we'll go through the questions. I know that maybe there will be some repetition in questions. So in cases where that applies, we may move through some questions a little more rapidly, but we'll take them as they've come. So
Very good.
let's start with number one.
All right, the question number one comes from Antoinette Parsons. The question is, we would like to know how the school board came up with a 25 to 40% figure they attribute of copying the aides are doing. Is the figure based on tallying staff members' badge logins to the copier? Do they have actual breakdown of this? And if so, does it show the amount of copying done individual to each school?
So I can take that, and I might defer a little bit to Anne and the other administrators for some greater detail. But I believe my understanding is that we have logs that are provided on a monthly basis from each of the buildings that detail the badges that were used to log into the printers through our printer tracking system, and that we were seeing that there was a correlation of the use from aides. But I think what's really important about this issue related to the aides, because I know that there's a lot of concern about this reduction, and we really appreciate that and are hearing that from the community. So we thank you, first of all, for sharing those stories, and from many of the aides who have shared their stories as well. And I think what's really important for us to understand here is that we're trying to look at areas in our budget to reduce, to attack this structural deficit that really threatens our ability to be a well-functioned and efficient school district. And what we're doing in looking at this aides position is really to focus our funding into direct instruction of students. This restructure is really looking to make sure that our time use is most efficient, and it's most efficient when it's delivering instruction directly to our students. And what we're seeing is that the schedule for some of our aides is not fitted into the day as best it could be. And we're really looking to continue to provide that support to teachers, but we're looking to also find ways to reduce some of the redundancies that we can accommodate at the central administration and not have to burden our aides with clerical work. And I think that there are some challenges that we're going to have to work through along those lines, and making sure that we're continuing to provide the best support that we can to our teachers and to our students. And we're going to continue to do that. So, Anne, I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to add in there, any detail that I missed for that question.
No, I don't need to add anything.
All right, moving on to question two. 4 years ago, when Dr. Phillips began serving as superintendent, he told instructional aides they needed to serve as learning support aides in order to continue to have a position within the district. At that time, elementary teachers put together a report based on what each of their aides providing classroom support did, and found the amount of time aides spent doing clerical was 10%. Since that time, Lorraine teachers have been told to lessen the amount of copying they give their aides to do. Speaking for Lorraine aides, the amount of time we do any clerical work is very minimal and has definitely become less than become less than 4 years ago. Most times, aides do any copying is to prepare materials they need to work with students or group of students. A rare occasion, significant time is spent doing clerical is when the classes the aide would be working in have an assembly. As a side note, often teachers ask to use our badges to make copies because they don't have their badge on them. We have always allowed them to borrow our badges.
Yeah, I think, sorry, go ahead, Ann.
My only comment about that is principals should be communicating with staff about not sharing badges, and that badges should be worn by all staff, so that if there is discrepancies related to something like this, that the protocol is everyone uses their own badge.
And I think our focus is to make sure that instructional aides are not doing clerical work. We understand that there may be some instance or a regular situation where it's necessary, but our goal is really to make sure that our aides are being focused into the direct day-to-day instruction. And we're looking to continue supporting our teachers in that way. And we believe that this solution is workable in the way that we put forward. And I don't mean to make light of how difficult that is going to be for some people. And I really appreciate the concerns that aides have. And I more than that, appreciate the love and the desire that they have to work in the district. And we believe that this is a solution that's workable, and that this is going to continue to provide support for students. And we're going to be able to focus that direct instruction on our students more directly in this way, by being able to make sure that all of that time is being dedicated to the students and to the supporting the teachers in the classroom.
All right, question 3. There have been times teachers have asked us to make copies because the job they sent to the administration building was copied incorrectly, and it was something the teachers needed right away to do in the classroom.
So I think one of the big things that's just going to be important there is for us to communicate between the central administration and the buildings to make sure if there are things that we can do better, that we are doing that. And I have confidence that our building principals, our teachers, and our staff at the administration building, and our administrators at the administration building are going to work to smooth some of those challenges out. But really, again, our focus is making sure that instructional aides are being used for clerical time, that they're being most effective when they're in front of students. And that's really why we want them in the district.
I think those are good points. And I just also wanted to bring up the fact that photocopying at the building level is not our most efficient means of photocopying. We have the copiers in each building all are under contract, and the cost per copy at the building level is more expensive than the central office copying process that we have. So we have a process in place. If teachers maybe can become a little bit more mindful of the benefits of the central copying, and the better we get at that, we'll save money in the long run by using the big copying machine, where the contracted per unit cost is much lower.
The next question: if cuts are made, how would this be implemented? Would seniority or staff be a factor? And if so, do those in seniority have the option of a different position rather than losing hours and wages?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I certainly appreciate the concern surrounding that question, but I think, and administrators correct me if I'm wrong, what we're really proposing at this point is just a single hour reduction for all of the instructional aides that are not funded through federal funds. And what that's really looking to do is make sure that nobody is losing their position from this reduction, because this is a reduction, and we want to make sure that we're providing as best we can for employees through that transition. That's going to be challenging for a lot of them. But really, again, we want to maintain the support that we're giving to our instructional staff and the faculty. And we think that by doing this across the board and making sure that nobody's losing their position is the best way to go about doing that.
Correct. That's correct.
The last, it says the majority of aides this cut would pertain to are Exeter taxpayers.
Yeah, I think that, I really appreciate that point. And it's certainly not something that we want to do, whether somebody's a taxpayer of this school district or another, because this is people's livelihoods. We're taking that very seriously. We'll continue to take that seriously in any type of reduction scenario that we move towards in the future. What we're really looking at here is making sure that we're protecting the efficiency of the district, and making sure that we're dealing with this budget deficit. And we really want to make sure that we're maintaining our effectiveness in the classroom. And we still believe that this reduction is workable. And that's the opinion of our professional administrators. And I think that we're gonna continue working through some of the challenges that are gonna bring that up. But I do appreciate you raising that. It's definitely in my thoughts, and certainly a lot of the other members of the board. And we're thinking about those things. So thank you for sharing that.
While we understand the need to look at every position and possibility to reduce the budget, please consider the number of people affected by this $105,000 cut. In addition to the above mentioned Exeter residents, our Exeter students will be impacted. We already struggle with adequately meeting the needs of students who need additional support. Now, with the loss of classroom instruction, we fear more students will be coming into the 2021 school year struggling and need extra guidance.
Yeah, so thank you for that point. One of the things that the administration has made clear to us is that overall, the reduction that is being proposed right now, in effect, would cut one of these part-time positions 2 times at Jacksonwald and Lorraine, and then 3 times at Rifton and Awatin. And we realize that that's going to provide challenges, but I'm confident that our building principals are going to be able to rearrange the staff in the way that they're going to need to make sure that we're supporting our students and our faculty in the best way that we can. And it's going to take some changes and some creativity, and it's going to be challenging, but I'm confident, and I think that our administrators are confident as well, that this is going to be a workable solution. Kids are not going to be left behind. We're going to continue providing on our objective and our mission that we're looking to do, which is to provide opportunity to our students so that they can be successful in the long term.
And Hunter, if I could just add to what you shared, I think the point that was made in the question, very, very important one, and the concern about loss of instructional time with the pandemic is very real. It's something that building administrators are already talking about and looking at. It's something my office and curriculum and instruction is very mindful of at this point in time, in terms of what can we make available to teachers over the summer, even being creative with our flexible professional development to just simply provide time, even virtually, for teachers over the summer to work together to talk about transition. What are the gaps that we anticipate going grade level to grade level or course to course, and then ensuring that folks have what they need to make that happen. So we're well aware of the challenge that is coming related to the pandemic. And even with a reduction in aids, we're going to remain committed to making sure that our kids' needs are met in the best ways we know how.
Question number 2 comes from Kevin Kramer, and it's about transportation. He has multiple questions. The first one, is the school district taking advantage of possibly buying gasoline in bulk or locking in currently low rates similar to the technique residents can use with heating oil? Since COVID affected our district, gasoline has dropped at least 50 cents per gallon.
And do you want to jump?
Sure. The district participates in the joint purchasing bid program through the Berks County Intermediate Unit, along with several other school districts and municipalities. We've already locked in our fuel bid pricing for 2020, 2021, and we're currently working on 21, 22 in order to take advantage of lower diesel, gasoline, and heating oil prices.
Has the school district changed the bus insurance coverage since the announcement of school being closed the remainder of the spring and buses not required? I see this as a huge savings.
The district will receive a 15% credit on their auto insurance premium for the current year.
All right, on to question 3 from Katie Hable, 2415 Goddard Avenue, Sinking Spring. On November 21st, 2019, there was an open forum at the Rifton cafeteria. Teachers, administrators, board members, and the community participated. There was a lot of wonderful brainstorming of ideas at this forum. 2 very long lists were created. 1, how can the district raise more revenue? And 2, what other ways can the district cut costs?
So that list was provided to the board. I actually have it here. Let me pull it up.
Well, yeah, actually, I missed the question. The question, does someone have these lists and have any of these avenues been pursued? What other avenues can be pursued to raise revenue for the district versus cutting aid positions who are hands-on with our students every day? So.
Yeah. So some of these items that were listed here, and we can, I believe, post this at some point as well if we want to share this around and if there's some interest in it. But a lot of the ideas had to do with trying to find alternative sources of revenue. One of them is, for example, hiring a grant writer for the district. Another one is look at energy savings, add solar panels, different items around these. So some of them I think are really going to be important to continue looking at in the future. And I really think that this is going to be important for us to look at some of these items. I can't say that all of them have been looked into as much detail maybe as we would like to, but certainly this is something that is a good starting point for the future. And I think as we look to address the remainder of this structural deficit, which is very likely to be far beyond what these reductions that are proposed now are going to look like. I think it's going to be important for us to work through some of these suggestions as we go into the future.
Question 4 comes to us from Laura Campling, Birdsboro. As a 1997 Exeter alumni, I find it sad and disheartening that the administration and board is considering eliminating its elementary strings program. Exeter has a distinction of having an outstanding music program, and the strings program has been around for decades. I participated in it, and I was proud to represent Exeter at the county, district, and regional orchestra festivals. It even earned me a college scholarship. I perform to this day and thank Exeter for giving me the opportunity. Pushing the start of the program from 3rd to 5th grade would put our students 2 years behind other districts and make it difficult to compete. I also believe it would have a trickle-down effect and weaken the string program as a whole. My daughter is in 5th grade, and the string program has been the highlight of her school career. My son is in 2nd grade, and I would like him to have the same opportunities that were provided to my daughter. I'm curious how the $800 cost per student was calculated. I pay for her music and instrument rental. Also, does the same teacher also teach elementary band, which is offered in 4th grade?
So I'll address the first part, and then Andy, you want to talk about in a moment how the number was calculated for $800 per student, or I guess per pupil. The proposal to eliminate elementary strings is a proposal that is suggested for the future as an area to look at. It was actually listed as an example as one of those areas that we would look at in the future, but this is not included in this budget reduction proposal. And that feedback is really helpful. And thank you for asking that question and raising those comments. And we'll definitely consider that as we move forward into next school year. But just to reiterate, that is not in the reduction proposal that we're working through this year, and it would not be on the table for this budget.
The cost that the person is referring to, the $800, really comes from the presentation that was done in November. I believe it was November for elementary. And it really reflects the cost of wages and benefits for 3 1/3 teachers that teach band and strings, and which is a total of around 418,000. And they serve, according to data from the music department, 493 students. So it averages out to over $800 per student.
All right, question number 5 comes from Sue Ann Reisig, an aide at our senior high school. As we navigate through these unprecedented times, everyone recognizes the unique challenges that come with predicting the financial impact that the governor's mandated closure of the state will have on businesses, as well as individual household budgets. Unfortunately, the board's preliminary discussion of budget cuts seems to disproportionately target those in our association who have the least economic impact on the budget, our part-time aides. Yet these men and women work with the children of the community who require the greatest amount of support. As the effects of these school closures become fully realized, the students may need more support and remediation than ever before. We challenge the board, before making any decisions, to reach out to the teachers who work with these aides to get a greater insight into the invaluable services that they provide. We ask the board to reach out to the parents of the children who have seen firsthand the effects these aides have had on the quality of their children's education. The association stands ready to work with the district to find other creative solutions to the economic challenges that we face. It is our hope that this budget can be balanced without doing it on the backs of those in our educational community who need us most, the students and their support personnel. Sincerely, Exeter Township Educational Support Professionals Association.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, just thank you for submitting those comments. This is a really challenging time. This is an unprecedented time. And I think that there's some merit to saying that we need to look in all areas of the district, not just our support staff, for reductions as we move forward. One of the things that I just want to comment on with her comments was that this budget is not going to be balanced. There is no way at this point in time that this budget could be balanced without utilizing fund balance. And the structural deficit is going to need to be worked on over probably a number of years because our goal is really to maintain the effectiveness of our program. And that is not going to be able to be done in 1 year because otherwise it would require us to slash budgets. And that's just not acceptable, I think, in the board's eyes. It has been cautioned against extremely effectively, I should add, by our administrators. And I don't think the community would stand for that. So what we're trying to do is take a measured approach. And we appreciate that it does not feel measured to you guys. It very much, we empathize with the challenges that you guys are facing right now. And what all of our employees are going to face as we move forward and have to look at reductions in professional staff and reductions in administrative staff. And there are certain legal requirements that have disabled us from looking at those areas this year. But this is a challenge that's going to be faced by our entire district. It's not going to be borne by just the support staff. And it's, I don't know what more to say than that because this is very challenging. And we hear what you're saying. And we're going to try and do the best that we can. And I think it's important for you guys to remain engaged with us and to continue to share your thoughts because we have received a lot of emails from our teachers. We've received a number of emails from our aides, and we want to continue to hear feedback from you guys. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this evening. And we hope to be able to join you in person in the future as well as we move forward both this year and next year and for future years. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
Well, Hunter, I thought that's a good explanation. I want to remind folks that we did have several opportunities for input to our reductions this past year with at least 4 public forums with the community. And at each one of those forums, I made some comments about some of the reasons why school districts are now put in really difficult positions. They're dipping into their fund balances, as Hunter pointed out, and they're actually taking fairly significant steps to kind of reduce costs. Those include furloughing of staff, raising class size, and cutting back on all forms of non-required services and programs. It's not anything that we look forward to doing. I think we are accustomed to in this district being able to take advantage and utilize and benefit from the support of our paraprofessional staff. We've invested a lot of time in training for them, and they are interwoven into the fabric of our instructional program. These are very difficult and challenging things for us to do, but we know that other districts, as we look around, are not nearly as invested in their paraprofessional staff in regular education service, and in some cases have very, very few people in these positions. As we look at surveys provided to us through the Berks County Intermediate Unit, we realize that as a school district, we're probably the most reliant of all districts in the county in regard to paraprofessional support in regular education. So it's an area that we see ourselves maybe out of step in some respects. Yes, we've benefited. We appreciate the work, and we value what they do, but we also know that districts who don't have the availability of these resources find ways of getting it done. And I think we have to learn from those districts, and we have to do everything we can to make sure that we're looking at every potential savings that we can if we're going to avoid, some of the economic problems that we have, that we anticipate.
Question 6 is a rather large one. It's multi-part, so I'm going to chunk it down for us. It comes from Tracy Duff, 4822 Partridge Drive. The first question is specific to the overall budget. What does the proposed budget, once cuts are made, provide our students? Since budget cuts do not equal tax rebates, paying the same or higher taxes while cutting positions, people, hours, extracurricular activities, 10%, 20% of school supplies, instructional software resources, and programs such as elementary strings, high school electives, junior high language courses, computer applications, etc., is 100% unacceptable to me. What is the approximate $80 million budget going to actually provide our schools? How is that money helping our students learn, grow, and succeed? How is it supporting our teachers in teaching our students?
Well, I think that's a very challenging question, and I appreciate it. I think to unpack all of the budget in that 80 million number, which is now closer to $79.3 million, is not going to be possible right now. And I encourage you to remain engaged, but let me just try and take it a little bit of a piece at a time. We're really working hard to make sure that this budget reduction plan is measured. And when I say measured, what I mean by that is that we're going to be able to continue providing effective education and proficient education to all of our students at all levels, elementary through secondary. And I think that that's really going to be where our focus is. There's a lot of things that are going to continue to be a part of Exeter that make Exeter Exeter. And part of that is going to be our music program, our arts program, our foreign languages. We're working hard to make sure that we're going to be able to continue offering those things. We're going to continue to offer electives at the high school. But truth be told, I think there are going to be a lot of changes that we're looking at in the future. I take your point very seriously that it's hard to believe that our taxes are going to either not increase or stay the same, and even possibly increase at this point when we're actually getting less. And I think that's a really hard reality that we're facing right now, because our structural deficit is outpacing our ability to provide additional services. And what I think we're really focused on is making sure that we address that structural deficit so that in the future, when we need to continue raising employee salaries and wages so that we can attract really proficient employees in the future, when we see additional needs come up. And one that's always been on my mind is having social workers in the district, as we see a proliferation of mental health needs from the kindergarten level all the way to the 12th grade level. We're not going to be able to provide that if we continue to have this structural deficit that challenges our fund balance and takes away our ability to be an efficiently operated district. And that's really what our focus is here now. But I appreciate your question. I think that all of us, that's on our mind. We share the concerns. I think there's probably members on this phone call who have said similar things to what you've just raised there. So thank you.
If all the budget reductions are approved, how is the $79.3 million revised budget allocated? Specifically, what classes, programs, languages, specials, electives, arts, and sports are offered? How are class sizes structured? How does my student without an IEP get help if struggling or falling behind, or needs to make up missed tests or work? How does this proposed budget support my student and their teachers? Please show how the entire budget is proposed to be allocated so that we can decide if the proposed cuts are the best for our schools, community, and most of all, our kids?
Well, again, I really appreciate that question. I can't sit here and break down the entire budget this evening. We encourage you to stay engaged with our process, and we'll try and identify some of those. And that's a really important narrative, I think, that you've brought up. And I think we want to address that as we move forward. In terms of the needs that your student has, we certainly encourage you to talk to your teachers about that, your students' teachers about that, your building principal about that, and they'll be able to identify for you support that your child can have. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide that. Beyond that, as it relates to the budget, what our real focus is going to be on is making sure that we're maintaining our effective program. And really how that looks in this situation is the reductions that you've seen identified. Those are going to be the extent of the reductions that we're looking at for this year. In terms of some of the things that you raised, I think art and music were one of them. We're not touching anything at this point. We're going to very carefully consider and evaluate if that needs to be looked at in the future. And we're going to have the community involved throughout that process. So again, stay engaged. We want to make sure that Exeter remains a wonderful district for people to live in, move in, and be educated in the same way that I was and that my family was. And we don't want to take that away from anybody. And we're looking to make sure that what we're providing is an effective education through an efficient operation. And that's really our focus here.
And Hunter, if I could just add to those comments
Sure.
as well. I think the other piece that is very, very important is that, for us as an administrative team, we say a lot that what we do because it's in the best interest of students. And please rest assured in knowing that, when we say that, we say that because we mean that. We truly believe that the decisions that we're making are in the best interest of students. And, we would not have put any of the budget reduction items that are on there, on that particular, proposed reduction list if we didn't believe as an administrative team that we still couldn't continue to meet the needs of our children, even if those reductions happened. If we thought doing those reductions was going to in any way not enable us to provide a quality education for students in Exeter, then as an administrative team, we wouldn't have put them on there. And so, because we don't want kids to suffer. We want kids to continue to get a quality education. And we believe even with these reductions that we can still make that happen. And the reason we can is because we have amazing teachers and we have amazing support personnel and amazing administrators that will work together collaboratively to make that happen.
And I think now is a good time as any to point out that this is very hard, and we're not discounting any of your comments, and it may seem that way, but really these are the same things that we're trying to wrestle with, and we're faced with extraordinary circumstances, and we're trying to navigate them as best we can. And really, as Patrick said, our interest is making sure that we're doing what's best for kids and what's best for the community, and that's really our number one focus through this process. We all come at that with different prescriptions for how these problems should play out. There's probably going to be disagreement and fair disagreement from members of the community and members even within our own staff. And you've heard some of those this evening. But really what we're focused on is trying to provide the best that we can. And we're working very hard at that. I've seen our administrators working hard at that. The board is really trying to tune into what they're doing and making sure that we're working hard at that as well. So we hear you. We want to continue hearing you, and we appreciate you raising the questions again. Thank you.
Third part of this first question still is, if school taxes remain the same or are raised, but the proposed cuts are made, how does that benefit students, schools, and community? Aren't you just expecting me to pay the same or more and get less for my kids, like charging me for a value meal but not giving me a Diet Coke and fries?
That's a really good analogy. I'm not sure I agree with it completely, but we understand what you're saying. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we have to face. And in truth, that's one of the challenges I think that public education in Pennsylvania is faced with. One of the challenges that we have is that the state continues to burden school districts with mandates. Those mandates can range anywhere from requiring school lunches to be given to every student, and we're not able to make collections on that except with parents, and we can't even hand the students envelopes as they were able to do when I was younger. And those mandates can range all the way up to making sure that we're providing teacher pensions to a fund that's underfunded. and that the state continues to look to the districts to balance as the underfunded levels continue to rise. So we're faced with a lot of challenges in Exeter, but this is also a challenge that other school districts are facing. And we're going to continue to try and navigate it the best we can and make sure that we're keeping taxes low as much as we can. And we're trying to measure those increases, control those increases, marginalize those increases, or eliminate those increases if we can figure out a way to do that. And we want to make sure that we're providing a product and an education where kids can thrive, where your son or your daughter is able to do all the things that you want to make sure that they can do when they graduate. So that's really our focus. We hear what you're saying. We're going to continue to think about that and consider that as we move forward. So it's not lost on us.
Moving on to the next part of this question. These questions are specific to the proposed instructional aid reductions. How does cutting 4-hour instructional aids provide a cost to value savings? Based on the 2018 census showing 9,847 homes in Exeter Township, my personal salary equates to a cost of 91 cents per household per year. For that 91 cents per year, I work with 4 teachers and approximately 100 students each day over 180 days. The estimated budget savings by reducing all K-6 instructional aids by 1 hour a day at cost savings of $105,000 would save each household only $10.66 a year in school taxes. The following year, proposed cuts of additional hour would save a total of $10.66 that year. Even if instructional aids are eliminated altogether, at the proposed cost savings of $105,000 an hour, we're looking at $420,000 divided by 9,847 homes as of the 2018 census, equaling $42.65 per home per year to have instructional aids in the K-6 schools to assist our kids every day. That's just $3.55 per month each household is currently paying in school taxes for all these K-6 instructional aid positions.
So I really appreciate that question, and I take your math for granted. What we are trying to look at here is trying to realize as many efficiencies in our budget as possible. We're looking at other school districts around the county. Governor Mifflin is one of them that sticks out in my mind as districts that do offer a lot less support in the classroom than we are doing right now, and that we're even proposing to do as we go forward. And we still believe that this is a workable solution. In terms of how this fits into the grand scope of the budget, I grant that it is a small piece, but this savings is significant. It's $105,000 that we're able to realize in savings in our budget, and making sure that we're still providing that support to our buildings and to our individual classrooms. And we're going to continue to look at doing that as efficiently as possible. I really take your point, and I appreciate you raising that. And that's something we're going to consider as we move forward.
How is their value associated with altering or removing a resource that costs taxpayers $3.55 a month, and as it currently stands? Does the $105,000 reduction, which equals $10.66 a year or 89 cents per month per home, provide a real cost to value savings? Is the 89 cent a month savings worth 1 hour less by each instructional aid in our K-6 building? For the 21-22 school year, will it be worth an additional 89 cents per month in school taxes to see a loss of 2 hours to support each day from each of the K-6 instructional aids compared to the 4 hours currently being provided today? I love my job. More importantly, there is a need for my job. In every classroom, in every building, our kids need support. Our teachers deserve support. I simply do not understand how our administration, people who hold a doctorate degree in education, do not see our worth.
I don't think that anybody is diminishing the worth that our employees have. We have tremendous employees, and we are very grateful for all the work that they're doing. I think it's really the times that we're looking at and where public education is moving in towards where we need to invest dollars to make sure that we're addressing every student's need. And that's becoming increasingly challenging, which is why we've had to move to these cuts and reductions as we move forward. And as we try to navigate this structural deficit. I think one of the other things that's important to point out is your argument is a good one. And it's a good one that's going to be applicable to every single reduction that we're going to be able to find in our budget. And that's what makes this especially challenging, And I appreciate you raising that point. And I think that that's something we're going to have to continue to keep in mind because this is a very challenging time. We appreciate you raising that question. And I certainly empathize with where you're coming from. And I can certainly understand why this is very challenging. And we really appreciate the fact that you love your job. And I wish I had better news.
Well, and I think too, public education always has been a people business, and schools are as strong as the people that work within them. And I think one of the reasons that we approach this the way in which we did is because by reducing it an hour, it allows nobody to have to lose their job. Yes, there is a reduction of the hour, and that's going to have an impact on people, and we fully understand that. But by doing it this way, every single aide that's currently in the building would still continue to be able to be an aide next year, as opposed to cutting a position entirely to where somebody would potentially be completely unemployed next year. And so I think it's because we recognize how important people are, and more importantly, the fact that so many of the folks that work in Exeter Township School District do because they love the district and love the community, that recognizing that doing it this way at least allowed us to continue to have our aides stay on as opposed to just simply cutting positions.
Question number 7 comes from Nadine Blackburn, 4729 Allison Road. It was stated under the elementary expenditures reduction that class aides in K4 were found to be copying 25 to 40% of the building copy output. The implication in recent board video presentations is that 25 to 40% copy output is equivalent to 25-40% of their hours worked. Is this the justification for the 25% reduction in aide hours, 1 hour per day for the 4-hour part-time aides? If so, I do not believe that the correlation between copy output and hours worked is accurate. In addition, this assumption is extrapolated to all aides in grades K to 6.
Yes, so thank you for that question. The answer to, I think, your direct question is no. That is not the justification. It's not the single justification for why we believe that this is workable and that this is a fair proposal. What we're really looking at, I think, is a whole picture of where we are trying to make sure that we continue to offer support to our faculty, to our students directly, and make sure that we're ensuring that nobody has to lose their job through this proposal, and making sure that as we move forward that this is something that we can continue to work from. In terms of suggestions that have been made that 25 to 40% of an aide's time is spent doing clerical work, if that suggestion was made on behalf of myself, and I think on behalf of the board, and I would suspect on behalf of the administration, we apologize for making that suggestion because that was not what we're trying to say. But there is a correlation between the clerical work that is being done and the time that is being used by our aides. And we're trying to make sure that our aides are being focused into that instructional time. And we're really relying on our building principals to make sure that we're doing that. And we're also asking our faculty to work with us and make sure that the time that aides are spending in the classroom is used effectively as best we can. And I appreciate your question. I appreciate asking for that clarification. So thank you.
As an aide at Rifton, I can speak to the fact that our reading and math aides do not do clerical work or copying except on an occasional basis as needed for working with students. All aide time is spent working with students. Therefore, what is the justification for recommending the 25% reduction in instructional aide hours and pay? When aides are working directly with students, it does not seem reasonable that this one group of employees be targeted for such a large percentage reduction while no pay reductions are mentioned for other staff.
Yeah, I think that's a point well made. We are looking to attrition some of the staff positions in a professional capacity, professional certified staff. We're attritioning those positions. There are certain legal requirements that prohibit us from looking at that professional staff and the administrative staff this year. And I think what we're going to be looking at in the future is ways to make sure that we can maintain our quality program while making some reforms to the way that we provide some of these needs. And you know, our intention is not in any way to make sure that just the support staff is feeling this pain, because this is a challenge that's going to require an all of district approach. And it's going to lead to some very difficult conversations, some very challenging conversations. And I think you're seeing that this is a very challenging proposal that we've laid out here, and we don't take it lightly. This is not something that we enjoy doing. Trust me, this is not how any of us want to be spending our time, and we want to spend our time on the board making sure that we're trying to do things as efficiently as possible. And this is a very, very trying circumstance, not only for the board members, but especially for our administrators who have to work with you guys on a daily basis. So your comments are well made. They're received well. So I appreciate you raising them and challenging us with those questions. And, you know, we empathize with where you're at, and we certainly want to make sure that we're continuing to care for all the aides in the best way that we can. And we wish that these were different circumstances.
Finally, in this question, regarding notification of employees about budget reductions eliminations. At Rifton, we have a program called Character Counts, which focuses on developing students' interpersonal skills and emphasizes treating others with consideration and respect. It's very disconcerting to me that by not appropriately communicating in advance to employees that their jobs could be affected by these budget reduction eliminations, the administration did not extend the same basic courtesies to its own employees, blindsiding people at this stressful time when many family, financial, and health concerns was, in my opinion, inexcusable.
Well, I appreciate you making that comment, and I think that some of our administrators want to jump in and respond to this. You know, I think the board was made aware of that concern as well, and the administrators responded before us even needing to jump in, because I think that they recognize that that was a misstep. It was not intentional, and I think they can probably speak to that better than I can, but I appreciate you raising the question. Thank you.
Yeah, what I can say to that, and we tried to apologize best we can in the many updates that we sent out and to the community, to the staff, as well as to the people that were affected. There was no intention at all to disrespect or devalue anyone at all. In our discussions with the board, we mistakenly focused ourselves on the budget itself and not how it would affect the people that we were discussing. Again, I can only apologize for the way we handled it. There was no intention at all to do anything that would make anybody feel any less. You've heard enough tonight how much we value the staff, and this is not easy for any of us. This is certainly something that we've been struggling with for months. Again, I can only apologize and say that as we made the decisions we made, they were very difficult to come to. But again, being done in the spirit, it was done for a reduction, not a personal case.
Yeah, I would like to say also that, you know, I think the general spirit of everything that we've tried to do up to this point has been as transparent as possible. So, I mean, this submission was not characteristic of the way, you know, we've been trying to operate, which is as above board as we possibly can. You know, and I think in defense of the administration, to some degree, I think, you know, we weren't at all at a point where we had any closure on that discussion. We hadn't, I think, as a board, concluded that that's the direction we were going in, and still, you know, we're in a process where we have yet to even pass a preliminary budget or draft budget for May and June. So we're still in the process of developing a final budget product. So I think in some respects it may have felt a little premature to notify folks of something that has not as yet come to any formal fruition in terms of a decision. But I do agree, even if there's going to be a mention about it or a discussion about it, which there was, people need to know up front. And that was, and I certainly accept the administration's explanation and an apology to the staff.
Question number 8 comes from Katie Habel, 2415 Goddard Avenue. The CARES Act legislation that is being proposed in the PA State Legislature is dedicating money to assist school districts. Exeter Township School District is slotted to receive $355,000. How does this money affect budget concerns?
Well, I think more than anything, it would be a relief to receive those funds, and we would have to probably defer to our administrators for their best judgment about how to allocate that. I think one of the things that dawns on my mind when considering that is that that is a one-time funding opportunity from the federal government, and that will help close some of the challenge, the financial challenge that we have now due to the immediate aftermath of the coronavirus and the associated, what we expect to be a recession. And what's true about it too is that it won't be there for the long term. And really what the challenge that's underlying all of this is not so much the coronavirus as much as it is a structural deficit. If this was just a challenge that we had because of the coronavirus, we'd likely be having a different conversation. We'd be figuring out how to weather this in a different way. But we do have this underlying structural deficit that needs to be addressed because it's going to reduce our effectiveness over time, and we really need to address it quickly before it starts to affect the impact. Before it starts to impact directly our students in the classroom. And that's really what our focus is right now. And as we're able to use that money as it would come in, we will use it to the best of our ability in the most efficient way possible. And I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that specific question.
We did include about 357,000 in our presentation from April 21st. And it's a good point that you made that it is one-time funds. These are federal funds, and there are about a dozen eligible uses. So we are still awaiting guidance on those uses, but it is important to understand that they are one-time funds.
Moving on to question 9. My name is Deb Gellert. I live at 77 Kinsey Hill Drive, Birdsboro, and I have been an aide with the district for 22 years. I felt the need to add some context to the proposed cuts to our instructional support time. We are contracted for anywhere from 3 to 4 hours a day. Any copies being done are instructional materials for the classroom because our district does not purchase workbooks. The statistics quoted by administration regarding the percentage of copies made by aides and the conclusion drawn that aides are spending an hour per day making copies is incorrect. In fact, the reality is that when an aide is being given a copy job to run, the aides return to the classroom to continue their work with students, returning after working with students. In 2018, the total number of households in Exeter Township School District was 9847. This cut to instructional aides represents a savings of $10.66 per household tax bill, give or take, based on the home's value. It's hard to understand why the administration always starts making cuts to balance their budget from the bottom. In this instance, they have targeted part-time people who receive no benefits except a pension contribution. I have many people in the district refer to us as the best bang for the buck the district gets. It's truly a shame that the administration has never valued us in the same way. Deb Gellert.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think it aligns to some of the questions that we've heard before, and I don't want to belittle it by repeating myself, and I really appreciate hearing that again. And I think really what our focus is on is trying to maintain the most effective program we can for the most efficient both spending and operation that we can. And we want to make sure that we're doing that to support our students and direct as much time that the aides can spend into direct instruction. It is very clear to us that we do see some opportunities for improvement here in this area. Where we want to make sure that we're going to try and continue to provide the support services to students as we go forward and as we start to draft plans around this. It's not accurate to say that that 25 to 40% figure is not accurate. We have logs that show that there is a correlation of work, but we take your point that that is not a full picture of what every aide is doing every day. And we we don't pretend that it is. And that's really not the motivation behind the reductions that we're looking at here. I think the motivation behind the reduction is trying to make sure that we're providing some support to our faculty and to our staff in the buildings and directly to our students in the most efficient way that we can.
Question 10. Good evening. The board is proposing to reduce regular part-time classroom aides by 1 hour per day. And your rationale is that you looked at our data consistently. According to Dr. Winters, after the review of this data, it was noticed that aides were copying 25 to 40% of the building copy output in K-4 buildings. What data are you referring to? Also, during the business function meeting, Ann Guidis, Director of Finance and Support Operations, said regular part-time classroom aide hours, K-6, are having days reduced by 1 hour due to the way classes are scheduled at the elementary levels, recess, etc. And aides were doing clerical work and copying. Do you have data to support these findings? If so, when was it collected and by whom? My concern is that the teachers work with the regular part-time classroom aides and principals to make sure the aides are assigned to classrooms when the students are present. It's my belief that when the teachers were asked to provide data in regards to how much clerical copying the aides were doing, the finding was 10%. This is significantly less than the 25 to 40% of building copying output, as Dr. Winters mentioned. Aides shouldn't be penalized for clerical work when teachers aren't given a number or percentage of what work they are allowed to have them complete. It's also in an aide's contract to do clerical work. Last thought, in order to lessen the copying for aides, teachers are asked to send bulk copying to the administration building, especially at the end of the school year, to be done over the summer. But sometimes that copying isn't done according to the teacher's directions, hence making more work for the regular part-time classroom aides at the beginning of the school year. If teachers don't receive the copies prior to the first student day or soon after. Therefore, my question is still the same. What data are you referring to? Thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. Emily Zentek, Exeter Township resident.
Yes, thank you for your question. I think that this has been addressed a little bit before, and I will try and touch base on it a little bit again. I think where we're seeing the source of this data is data that the administration collects. We have monthly logs that are produced by each of the buildings that detail the copy output per employee by their tracking numbers. In addition to that, we're utilizing information that I believe, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, is provided by our building principals in the way that they're scheduling aides on a daily basis. And we are seeing some overlap where principals and I shouldn't say the principals, where aides are utilizing certain hours of the day that are crossing over with our specials and with lunch periods and with recess. That's my understanding of it. Patrick, do you want to add to that at all?
No, that's correct. When we had the conversations around, this particular item, we had conversations with the building principals. We looked at how aides were being used, how things were being scheduled, and made some conclusions and some determinations that if we reduce them by an hour, we could still maximize their impact with students without negatively or adversely impacting the classroom.
Folks, I'm going to make a suggestion. I know we have several more questions to cover. It seems like we've been covering almost exclusively issues related to our aides and the proposed reduction for aides. I would suggest, Mr. Way, could we move to questions that maybe are not aide related, and then if we have time remaining, we can come back to the aide questions and finish up those. But I'd like to get to some of the other questions because I think we've really, of all the responses so far tend to be, I think, somewhat a little repetitive. I'd like to get to areas that we haven't maybe covered yet. I also, just in terms of time parameters, would like to suggest that we'll be finishing up around 9 o'clock. So I know in terms of our responses, if we're going to try to cover all of our answers, we need to try to move things along a little bit. So.
All right, I'll move on to question 13 then. Why is the district spending so much money on sports during these hard times? I saw the track is being replaced at $650,000 and heard that spring coaches were paid in full when they only had 2 or 3 practices. I feel Exeter needs to focus on classroom and not give the athletic directors every need. I am a senior citizen on a fixed income.
Well, thank you for that question. And if you could address in a moment the spring coaches question, because I'm not sure about the answer to that. To the other pieces, I think we need to recognize and put into context that the money that we spend on athletics comparably to some of our other programs is small. It's my understanding, and Ann, correct me if I'm wrong here, but our current budget has budgeted about $1.6 million for student activities, and that's in the context of our $78.7 million budget. I take your point with the track. That is a project that was on our KCBA study, or I'm sorry, our capital improvement list for next summer. The board chose to move it up because we do have the funds available to do the project, and we chose to move it up this year because we're already have the track closed, and to be able to make sure that we're continuing to benefit from that revenue stream and that members of the community are still able to use that next year when we're going to have both of our athletic events and that we're also going to have rentals. We want to make sure that that's available to our community members. We take your point that we don't want to spend unnecessarily on sports where we don't need to. We're definitely going to be keeping that in mind, and the athletic director, I think, knows that as well. But I don't know if I would characterize it the same way as you have, but again, I appreciate your question. I think it keeps something in the forefront of our mind that we need to keep at the forefront of our mind, which is that we're making sure that the vast majority of our spending is focused on students in the classroom, because that is our ultimate objective.
As far as the coach pay is concerned, Act 13 was passed soon after the closure happened. And according to that, no employee who has a certain commitment would be paid no more or no less than their wages. So we, because there was a commitment to these coaches, they were in their positions, athletes were on their roster, then we, according to Act 13, were required to pay no more or no less.
One of the other things that has just been pointed out by one of our other board members here is one of the other reasons that we had moved the track up and that we were looking to replace it either this summer or next summer was because some of the maintenance issues have started to progress in a way that they could potentially present safety challenges to athletes, to community members that are using the track, and to students, and that could create a liability for us as we move forward, which is one of the reasons that we needed to act quickly. And I think that is important to keep in mind as well, because I think one of our focuses is trying to make sure that we have facilities that our community can use, that our students can use, that our athletes can use. And we really want to make sure that we're preserving that for the community, because we believe that's what the larger community expects. And we want to make sure that we're providing on that expectation.
And I'd also like to just say too, I mean, I think when we were looking at priorities, we were trying to establish what is essential and non-essential. And part of the essential definition had to do with safety. And if we felt that there was a potential, as you mentioned, Hunter, there potential liability associated with anything that we didn't do, or safety concern or impact on students or community, that would accelerate the need to kind of move forward with the project. So it's something that had to be done, and we had the funds available for it. It doesn't impact the budget coming up. Yeah, you know, it was money that was set aside in the capital account, you know, for such a purpose. And we have to maintain our facilities. We've got multi-million-dollar facilities there, and we can't let them fall apart. That's you know, that would be just as damaging as anything else.
Our next question comes from Tracy Slonaker, resident, 4375 Prestwick Drive, also parent of 3 Exeter students and substitute teacher. What can we as residents do to get the state to allocate more money to the school? Is there someone we can write to, or more that we can do, since I doubt they will take our letter seriously?
Dave, do you want to take that one?
Well, can I
Yeah.
jump in first?
Please
Um,
do.
Sure, Dr. Hamburger. I appreciate your question. I spend a lot of time on Zoom conferences with the other superintendents in the county, and you can rest assured we're all concerned about the finances of the districts. And we meet with the legislators at least once or twice every couple of weeks, just to stay connected with them. So, as for your question, would they take your letters? They may, but you can certainly make phone calls. I know you can't visit their offices right now because of the situation we're in, but you can make personal phone calls as well, or personal letters. I know a lot of times you will have people send a template and they'll attach their name to it. They will not be as attentive to that if they get a handwritten personal letter. So I would suggest that as well. But it can't be just you. It's got to be a big group. There are 18 superintendents in Berks County, and we have a large voice in Harrisburg because we speak as one collective group. So my suggestion would be that you and any other like-minded citizen in our school district start to call our legislators and call them often, and call them on not only the need for as Dr. Hamburger has said many times, the support that the school districts need that they're not getting from Harrisburg, but also, the talk of like right now, the situation, we touched a little bit on the CARES Act. That money is going to be helpful, but it won't be helpful if it's used to supplant our budget. We're working right now to make sure in Harrisburg, they understand that that's supplemental money. That's money on top of what we should be getting. So that would be a certain area where you could certainly contact our legislators and let them know about that. And in general, as you've heard many times about mandates, there are a lot of unfunded mandates that the districts have to provide. And again, if you would continue to sort of continually talk to your legislators about that, they're hearing from us. They would certainly, I think, appreciate hearing from the taxpayers as well. So I thank you for your question, and I would suggest you take up arms and keep calling. Thank you.
The next question comes from Matt Zoltak. What has been the annual end of year variances between budget and actual for both revenues and expenses for the past 5 years?
For the past 5 years, Anna may have to turn to you for that, but it's my recollection that last year and the year before we had budget deficits. I think this year we're anticipating 800,000, and I think in 2018-19 we had 650. Is that close to it?
In 2018-19, you're correct. It was a deficit of 650,000. The projection for this year, because of changes in expenses due to school closure, we're probably looking at around the same amount. Before the school closure, we were really looking at an amount of about 1.5 million. But it's important to point out that in our long range projections, 5 years out, that even with modest increases in taxes of about 2%, we will continue to have deficits. And that's all related in large part to wages and benefits, and also with limited state funding. So the trend has started, and that's why we're in the process that we're in.
Yeah. And just to maybe address your question, Matt, some of that information for all of our previous year's budgets, as well as all of our audits that are conducted annually, are on the district's website. If you go onto the district's website and click under Administration and Business Services, there are 3 options. I think it's PDE 2067, Budget, and Management and Discussion Letters. And all 3 of those areas have a lot of financial information that you can parse through. And we can certainly try and clarify that in the future if there's any specific questions you have in there. So I think that will really help you try and look for some of the answers that you're seeking.
How much in CARES money do we expect to receive? Is that included in the budget?
It is included in the budget, and it's 330,000 with some change on top of that.
Is transportation fully contracted out? If not, it's time for another RFP.
No, transportation is not contracted out. We don't anticipate there would be a need for an RFP. The board went through an extensive 1.5 year long process last year, that ended last year, to examine that very question because we thought the same thing needed to be addressed. And it turns out that we run an extremely efficient operation. We're going to be looking to double down on the provision, I think, of transportation by the district. And I believe, and I think that that was really borne out in the RFPs that we did put out, that our cost savings with our in-house staff is very large. And I wouldn't want to see anything to reduce that. And I think that there's also been some suggestions made at some point that if we had contracting, we wouldn't have to pay for that. And that would save us money right now. And I think there's really two issues with that. And I just want to address those really quickly. One, it's not clear that a contractor would not seek the rest of their contracted costs for the rest of the year. And that could potentially pose some challenges if that were to go to legal action as a violation of contract, and that would expend more lawyers' fees, and we don't want to do that. And on top of that, that is a very short-term solution for a long-term problem, which is that contracting in our eyes would cost more to the Exeter taxpayers than it would keeping it in-house, and that's over the long term. And really our focus is on the long-term and strategic perspective of how we're spending money and investing our resources wisely. And we're not looking to be, I think it's penny wise and dollar foolish. We're not looking to do that at all.
Our next question comes from Donato Cassis. The question is, what projects specifically have been started or completed since the school shutdown in 2020?
And can you address that? I'm not sure of the answer to that question.
Capital projects, we are currently working on a chiller project at the junior high school, and it is considered essential because it is a cooling issue. We've also started other projects at Lorraine Elementary and Jacksonville to replace unit ventilators in each of the classrooms. And those are also considered essential.
And Joe, if I can jump in really quick to the previous question about contracting for transportation services. My responses stand. I don't want to change those at all, but there is one thing that I neglected to mention, which is that in this budget reduction proposal and what our thought were part of our considerations going forward is examining the need for RFPs for other services in the district. And that may be something that we explore going down the road to see if there are cost savings that will benefit the district and in operating the most efficient institution as possible. And those are things that I think we're going to be looking at as the need arises.
The last part of this question is why, if there is a budget deficit, could funds not have been reallocated from redoing the track?
So that's a great question. Theoretically, yes, we could have done that. And can you just shake your head to approve that's true? If we wanted to move money from the capital equipment fund back to the general in our discretion?
No, you cannot.
Oh, you cannot. Okay.
No.
All right. Well, I was wrong. So it was not an option available to us then.
That's correct. That track is being funded out of capital project money, which could not be moved back into general fund.
Can you expand maybe on that a little bit and the restrictions around that? Because I think that's a really important point that some people might see, that the district has a very large fund balance, multi-millions of dollars, and just help us understand why there are some restrictions around doing that.
Well, there's different types of capital project funds. There are those that are the result of a bond issuances or notes for specific building projects, larger building projects. Then there's a capital project fund, which accumulates as a result of transfers from the general fund, transfers of excess funds at the end of the year, if there are excess revenue over expense. And this is a best practice, a common practice of districts, so that they're able to fund smaller type capital projects in the future without having to, increase taxes as part of the general fund. But once they are transferred into capital project status, they cannot be transferred back. There are different uses for funds out of capital project. You can buy buses, which this district has done in the past with capital project funds. Technology is a possibility. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, that's really helpful, Ann, and I think that even educates me a little bit on that issue where I wasn't aware of some of that too. And I think, to the commenter's point, we could have potentially shifted some of our purchasing around so that we didn't have to redo the track. But I don't think that was a valid option that we had. We have expectations, I think, in the community of what our facilities are. We need to maintain those facilities. That track is in a stadium that has been a significant investment for the community. And I think that the community's expectation for the district is to have good facilities. And that's really was our primary motivation when doing that, because those facilities serve our students, our athletes, and even the community, which I understand gets a lot of use out of people who go into the track throughout the day. The gym classes use them regularly. And we also have multiple sport teams that practice on that field and on that track. And we don't want to harm the facility that we have there. And that facility is not a part of the structural deficit that we face. And it's not one of the underlying reasons for it. So I think that was not an option that was available to us.
The next question comes to us from Joe Hepp, 4727 Allison Road. It's 3 parts, so I'm going to get all 3 of them out there and then we can answer them. What is the current fund reserve balance, and what is the 5-year trend in the growth or depletion of that balance? What percentage of the proposed 1.34 million for the 2021 school year will carry over to future budgets? And what anticipated capital projects in the coming years are considered essential? And do you have an estimated cost of those projects?
So the last one, in terms of the total estimated cost, and can I toss that over to you? But I think, part of our desire is that we're going to continue to look at those projects to see if they are essential. We want to continue to measure that because we don't want to invest significant resources into some of these projects, especially if they're not essential and we have other pressing needs that may come up as time goes on, because our facilities, some of them are newer, some of them are aging, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining them. On one of your other questions, I think it was, Joe, can you reread the first part of the question?
What is the current fund reserve balance, and what is the 5-year trend in the growth or depletion of this balance?
Well, I think there's different components of the fund balance. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think our total fund balance for all funds is around $28 million at the start of this fiscal year. I don't know what it looks like right now after we've started to invest in some of the projects that we have. But there are different parts of that, like I said, and one of them is our general fund balance, which we have limitations on how high that can be. And then the other fund balances are really contained within our capital funds, which, as Ann alluded to in the previous question, needs to be invested into capital projects as we move forward. To the middle piece of your question, the depletion of the fund balance is predicted in our 5-year projection. No matter the situation in terms of tax increases, we would see impact to our fund balance. And depending on how insignificant or significant those tax increases are, it could be I don't think catastrophic is putting it lightly. or is putting it in appropriately. And that's one of the things that we see on the horizon as something that we really need to work on. As to what's going to be reduced from our structural deficit because of these reductions, I think it's in the ballpark of about $700,000 to $800,000. That was from my own math and identifying what's a recurring cost. But Anne, maybe you can speak to those a little bit better than I can.
I think your estimate of around 800,000 is accurate. We are deferring some camera and technology replacements, so they will happen in future years. So I think what you've said is accurate enough.
And do we have a total anticipated cost right now of projects that we have in the future? I know we do. Are you able to provide that?
If you want me to pull that up right now, I can.
No, can we put that in the FAQs that will be put out after the town hall? Because I think that's an important question. But no, I don't think pulling time aside now to do that would be necessary.
I can tell you that with the Lorraine and Jacksonville projects, which are 3.5 million, what we'll have remaining after the end of those projects is what is in capital reserve, which is about 4.5 million. But then we obviously in the FAQ will provide how those funds will be used and what our future needs will be.
Mm-hmm.
Next question comes to us from Susanna Marino, who's a secondary special ed teacher at our high school. As a secondary special education teacher and a taxpayer in the district, I'm greatly concerned regarding the potential cut in staff, specifically not replacing the emotional support teacher at our senior high school. As we move into the fall, we will continue to be navigating new territory. We will be entering the school year not knowing the mental state of students, those who have already been identified as needing mental health support, and those who may be newly identified. What is the rationale for not replacing a staff member who is clearly needed, both to support students and to ensure a safe environment at our high school?
So that's a great question. I might need to rely on Patrick and Bob to help me out a little bit here, but what I can add to begin with is I think what you're identifying in terms of student needs are some of the same things that we're seeing in terms of this proliferation of mental health issues, and we're very conscious of that. We have existing staff, emotional support staff at the high school that we'll be utilizing, and that we'll also be utilizing other members of our special education team at the high school to help with that caseload. There's obviously a cost to attritioning a position like this, and we are concerned about this, but we believe that our current needs can handle those caseloads that we are seeing, and that we're going to continue to provide support to all of our students. Bob and Patrick, do you guys want to add anything to that?
Well, what I can add is there were discussions amongst the administration on the position, and we came to an agreement that we could support the needs of the students by not having that position filled.
The next question comes from Matt Zoltek. It's two-part, actually. The first question is, what is the raise for the Act 93 group for 2021? What about the superintendent? Has the board discussed a salary freeze for the 2021 school year?
So it's my understanding, and the people affected can correct me if I'm wrong, all of our cabinet administrators have volunteered to take a salary freeze. As we have a new superintendent coming in, that's probably going to be something that we have to discuss with her upon her arrival. For Act 93 administrators, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Part two, what is the employee premium share for medical benefits?
I think it changes between our different groups. I believe for teachers, it's 13.5% is the premium share. And I'm not sure what it is for our support staff. Anne, do you know that off the top of your head?
5.5.
5.5, okay.
Moving on to the next question. Thank you for taking time to answer questions tonight. What does the fall look like for both school and sports? This question is coming from Valerie Blatt.
I think that's a great question. Bob, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, it is a great question. As far as an answer, um, in all honesty, we don't know right now. The data will drive our decisions when it comes to COVID and what the numbers look like. Right now, Berks County is a hotspot. What I can tell you is right now, the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the governor is working with various universities and colleges such as Harvard and John Hopkins and a few others to look at the research into what it would look like to restart or reopen the schools in the fall. There is a task force. It's actually titled Back to School 2020 Task Force that will be including administrators from across the state to look at various areas, instruction, facilities, transportation, all the areas that will be impacted as we try to come back in the fall. And then by June 5th, we're supposed to be getting some type of plan presented to us by that task force. And at that point, the local area, the local level, in our case, it would be the 18 superintendents in the Berks County Intermediate Unit getting together and taking the task force guidelines and recommendations and putting them together for the local districts. That sounds like a lot, but all that really depends on what will be going on as far as the coronavirus, its impact on our area, and what the governor does as far as the easing of social distancing. That being said, there are still some areas, ideas that you may have heard publicly talking about bringing students in at staggered times, reducing class sizes by splitting the classes. How that's going to be, how that will be impacted could be in many ways. It could be bringing students in on on opposite days. It could be bringing students in mornings and afternoons. Those are all areas that are going to need to be looked at. We're also looking at what we're going to do as far as how we keep students social distanced. Ideas that are out there are for students to stay in the classroom and the teachers to change rooms, for lunches to be given in the classrooms rather than having students in the halls and in the cafeterias. That's a lot of ideas, of a lot of options. At this point, it's all really speculation right now until we have more information, not only from the governor and the task force, but what the local districts will be able to handle and function. And this has a direct impact on finances. One of the things that concerns beyond the budget is what the impact, the budget impact will be of trying to put a plan together to resume school in the fall and some of the options that you just heard me bring out. So that's a lot of words to really say. I don't have an answer for you right now. We're looking at everything. We're trying to get the options together as quickly as possible. Right now, that middle June time is probably when you're going to be able to hear some more specifics from us. But that's really the instructional piece. The sports piece, that will be similar. I think when the easing takes place, some of the sports may or may not start. Will that happen with people in the crowd? I can't say yes. You may have heard some of the professional sports are looking at, trying to run sports without fans. I guess what I can say though is at this point, any decisions that are made are going to be done with safety first and foremost. So, whatever things we decide, whether it be instructionally or as the sports you've asked for, it'll be done with as much safety as we can provide.
Joe, you're muted.
Yep, saw that.
You want to do 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up?
Sure. Our question is from David Morganti. It says, with regards to cost-cutting options, I understand that there are certain costs that are mandated by the PA Department of Education, such as special education and charter school expenses, that are difficult or impossible to reduce. Also, outsourcing certain staff, such as bus drivers and other support personnel, most likely would cost more over the long term and possibly result in less desired outcomes for school students, based upon other school districts that have tried such an approach. However, has there ever been any consideration with outsourcing certain roles currently performed by administration employees? Also, with regards to the condition of the track at the Don Thomas Stadium, has a repair replace analysis been done to determine what the best course of action would be regarding the issue?
So I think for the second question, in terms of a repair replace analysis, I don't know if there's something formal that you're referring to. I don't believe that something formal like that has been done, but it's been in the opinion of our facilities director and our athletic director that the rehabs that we were doing on the track were no longer sufficient for the long term, and that it had been a long-term expectation that we would eventually have to resurface the track. And that's what the decision that we came to. If I got any of that wrong, and please correct me, or Bob, please correct me. Other than that, with outsourcing our professional staff, or I'm sorry, outsourcing our administrators, I think it has been considered in passing and has not been thoroughly examined. And I think that that's something that is on our minds, and that's something that we will consider, because as I think I've said a few times now, we're not looking to put the burden of this challenge on any one group. This is going to be something that's shared amongst the district, and we're going to make sure that we're providing the same level of service and trying to make sure that our students are well served through that service. And if we can do that by having a cost-effective management consultant come in and provide senior administrative support and do it in a way that continues to offer the most opportunity that we can to students, and how that trickles down from the central administration to our faculty and to our staff and to our students, then we'll certainly consider it.
Question comes from Michelle Bouch. It says, are we getting money back from not having graduation at Santander? $25,000 would help the budget.
And do you want to speak to that?
I have not seen any disbursement for it, so I have to follow up with Mr. Campbell on the contract conditions.
Well, I think if we can recover those costs, or if those costs have not been dispersed in the first place, and we're able to do that without violating any provisions of our contract, that's something that we were certainly going to pursue. So I thank you for that question. Joe, do we have another short one?
Sure. This comes from David Gellert. Has the school district received any COVID-19 funding from the PA Department of Education to assist with funding loss? Is the school district permitted to seek assistance through the COVID-19 payroll protection program or other available government-sponsored programs?
The PPP program doesn't apply, I think, to government agencies or public agencies, I should say. And to my knowledge, I don't think we've received any money related to the virus from any reimbursements at this point. Is that correct?
No, the only thing in the horizon is the CARES funding, but we are going to apply for reimbursement through PEMA and FEMA for supplies that we've had to purchase.
And examples of that would be like wipes, PPE, if we have any for.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any more short questions, Joe?
Just looking here.
Hey, Joe, I saw a question about the tax rebate for senior citizens.
Sure, go ahead. Let me find it here. Sorry about this. I'm just scrolling here. Well, okay, the question comes from Matt Zoltak. Why doesn't the district consider a tax rebate program for senior citizens like some districts offer?
And I think the answer is that we do. We do offer a tax rebate. Hold
The-
on, I'm trying to make myself video again. Sorry about that. That we do offer a tax rebate, is that correct, Anne, for senior citizens if they volunteer in our school district?
Correct. The program that we offer is to allow them to work up to earn just under $600, so that at the end of the school year, after they've paid their tax bill, we will refund them that money.
Okay. And another short question I saw about was how is this going to affect special education aids, the current proposal? And the answer to that, I believe, is it will not affect any of our special education aids.
Correct.
Those were just short questions that I saw the answer to, so that I knew the answer to.
Well, with that, Joe, do we have a decent amount of questions that are left?
There are probably a half dozen that are
Okay.
left.
So I think what we had discussed, what board members had discussed when we were planning to try and host this virtual town hall was to take some of those questions that we couldn't respond to this evening and take them in writing and post that with these FAQs that we'll be posting as a follow-up. So you have my commitment. If I have to be the one to do that, I will do that and make sure that those are responded to, because we do appreciate greatly the questions that people have raised tonight. I think I'll just say a few things and then I'll pass it over to other board members because I've probably spoken to irritate some people this evening and I don't want to go on longer than I have to. So first of all, just again, reiterating, my thanks for raising these questions. I know this is a video recording that I'm probably going to go back over and take notes on because I really want to make sure that I got everybody's questions and I'm really taking that to heart. And I think we really are trying to take the comments of the community to heart, especially as we consider how to vote for this budget. I think all of us have ideas about where we're going to end up, but we really want to make sure that we're measuring that against where the community's desires are. And we really sincerely want to be responsive to what the community wants. And we feel like we're doing that this way, but we want to keep our eyes wide open to what you guys are expecting from us. Please continue to email us. Please continue to contact us and reach out because we really do appreciate it, even though it's hard. And I hope that we'll be able to join each other in person soon. I expect that this would be a lot harder in person because you can definitely feel more emotion from people. But this really is an important part of the community to us, and it's important for you to be able to talk to us directly. And I certainly look forward to that opportunity. I just appreciate your willingness to participate this evening. So thank you.
Can I just say too, thanks, Hunter, for shepherding us through this process. I think you did an excellent job of kind of capturing the essence of the board's position on several of these areas, and it's not an easy process, but I think you have shown that you've really, as chair of our business functions committee, really kind of done your due diligence in thoroughly understanding the budget and working with Mrs. Guidish and the administration and the rest of the board, obviously, and being able to articulate it for the benefit of our community. I would ask Mrs. Guidish, just maybe to kind of summarize what we can expect in the next couple of months in terms of the budget timeline. Folks might be curious in terms of, when will the budget be passed and what are the next steps that we go through.
Okay, during the month of May 12th will be a workshop meeting, and I will provide an update to the general fund budget. May 19th, the school board is required to adopt a proposed final budget, which will show some level of tax increase, if there is going to be some level of tax increase, but we must provide that in the state's form. It'll be on display for 30 days prior to final adoption, which is June 23rd. But again, we'll do another update June 16th. We've pushed back the June meetings to June 16th and the 23rd to allow us more time to get information about the state's budget and our own position. So, and June 23rd will be the final adoption. Millage will be set. And that's it.
So for folks who might want to see the actual budget itself, I mean, at one time there would be an actual hard document that would be available in the administration building. I'm sure that's not the case. What do folks do if they want to be able to access the budget?
We will post it on our website. We'll put a headline out there and a link to where it is. If someone is not able to gain access to it, I'll provide information to contact me, and somehow I will make it available.
Thank you. So before we wrap up, are there any additional comments that folks would like to make before we close the meeting this evening? Any board members or any member of our administrative team? Okay. Well, I'm just going to say again, thanks to the community for your patience, for your understanding, for taking the time to ask the questions. I hope you found this of value. Maybe for some of you, it's creating more questions than it's provided answers, but we're doing the very best we can to really work through this. We know that we're facing a steep challenge, and we're trying to really reduce that level of impact and pain that might be experienced as a result of the loss in revenue that we're anticipating. So thanks again for folks for tuning in. I just would suggest, our board meetings again are going to be on Zoom conferencing and on YouTube obviously through the months of May and June. So feel free to participate. There will be public comment opportunities again in much the same way as you saw here. You'll be able to submit questions and comments as you would a regular board meeting. So again, thanks everybody. Stay safe and have a great night. And with that, we'll close our meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.